for the Joan Quinn Profiles. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview, the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, LA Style, and Detour magazines, Joan covered the social set, the Hollywood hotshots, the international art scene, the mysteries of food, the excitement of travel, and the fabulous world of fashion. Joan continues to find creative people on the cutting edge who make things happen. Here's Joan Quinn.
Exciting.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. Waiting to be profiled is actress-playwright Sarah Miles and artist Charles Garabedian. For years, Sarah Miles has been an actress, and in so many films, including Ryan's Daughter, The Servant, The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea. She's appeared on American television in Dynasty and worked in numerous stage productions, both here and abroad. At this point in her career, she's turned to writing, W-R-I-T-I-N-G. Her first play, Charlemagne, has been produced in England and the United States. She premiered and debuted the play Charlemagne at the Fountain Theater in Hollywood. Why writing after all these years of acting?
Well, I really always wanted to do something else. I wasn't quite sure what it was that was deep in me that needed accessing. Something dormant lay there. And my schooling was a tragedy because I was severely dyslexic in a time when there was no such word as dyslexia. So I was booted out from school after school, and although it was fun being a rebel, there was also something niggling that was something else I should be doing. So I turned to acting as a last resort, as most of us do.
How did you get to acting?
Well, my mother saw me in a play, and I had this severe stammer as a child. And when I was performing, the stammer went away. So she thought that this was obviously where my future lay. So she thrust me into RADA.
That happens many times, doesn't
Yes.
it? You put yourself into a different role. Did you notice it happening?
Well, that's how I learnt not to stammer, in fact, because when you stammer, it's because your creativity is going ahead of your ability to speak. But when you've memorized something, it's coming through the memory drawer, and therefore you slow up sufficiently to be able to not to stammer. That's what it's about. Yeah.
Well, when you brought your creativity back to writing, did your stammer start again?
No, my stammer has disappeared for good now since I started writing. I must have accessed what I was meant to be doing all my life, I think.
Did you start your writing career with Charlemagne?
Oddly enough, yes. It was the first thing I wrote, yes.
Tell us a little bit about it, because it's a play that is serious. It has some wonderful, funny lines, and it's maybe a bit foreign to Americans. I think it comes from a real English point of view.
Well, I suppose it is English language. I know it is English. I am English. Nothing wrong with American, but English is English and American is American. And they're quite different. Even though we speak the same language, the differences are enormous, don't you find?
Well, I also find the sensibility different. I
Right.
think things that I was laughing at, I felt I was laughing from an English point of view.
Right.
And maybe other people in the American audience didn't understand it.
Right.
So tell us about Charlemagne, because
Well,
it's quite extraordinary.
Well, it came from a true story. I was living in America at the time, and I went back to see my old friend, and she'd got married in the interim. And this particular story unfolded before my very eyes. I was the sort of the Lilibet figure, the friend who comes to stay.
Oh, I see. So you got to see it all.
I got to see it all.
Give us a quick synopsis.
Well, it's an unconditional love story. It's about two people who are married happily, and the man goes on the journey. First of all, he thinks he's a transvestite, and finally the wife is able to embrace this as long as he doesn't go out anymore in the clothes and he only dresses up indoors. And this works for a while, but of course he's not a transvestite. He is, in fact, a true transsexual. And this is something that's on a soul level, not on a sexual level at all. It's way beneath the peripheral of sexuality. It's a deep need, purely, to be in the body that you are meant to be in. So he goes on the journey to become a full transsexual. And his wife and he have an amazing relationship in the first place. They were like twin souls. And so the story is about this woman trying to open her heart and lift to the heart with this husband who is now turning into a woman.
I think the idea of where you say twin souls and the love, and you talk about unconventional and also unconditional love.
Right.
How do you define a family in this present day? And you've hit a whole new kind of landscape.
Well, I do think that it's time we all hit the heart, you know. The heart needs a good hit. It needs a bit of it needs to be hot, you know. It needs to be fashionable now to learn to love unconditionally, because if we don't learn to love unconditionally, then mankind has had it.
Did you play the role when it was first done in England?
Yes, I did it very quietly. I wanted just to see an audience's reaction to it, because it's a very new piece, it's much on the edge, and I didn't want to bring it into London without first trying it out. And I played Clara, the wife, for 3 weeks very quietly in Oxford. And it was an amazing success there. I didn't bring it into London at the time because one of the characters wasn't quite right and I didn't want to take them in. But I've now had an offer to take it in, so I will. So it's all very exciting.
Then when you debuted it in Hollywood, you weren't playing the role. You were sitting back with the director. Did it feel funny to hear your words, your written words coming from someone else's mouth?
It did rather. It was a very good experience for me because all I like to do in life is to learn lessons, and I learned an awful lot of lessons. I didn't want to direct it. I chose not to direct it. I chose not to be in it. I just wanted to sense what it's like, as you're saying, to feel those emotions of having written something and not being in it. So it was very important for me, and I learned an awful lot just from watching the process of actors reaching for the part, which was fascinating to me.
When you worked with the director, did you choose a director, or did Ted Wyant come to the play separately?
Ted Wyant came separately because I couldn't come out here when I wanted to, so I missed the beginning.
Did he do the casting, or were you?
I wasn't involved in the casting.
I see.
So I was fait accompli, really.
When you came out, though, did you work with him during previews and during the run of the play?
I was there the whole time. I never left his side. Poor old Ted Wyant.
And how did he feel having you there watching all the time?
Well, I think it's quite a trip. I mean, I think he's a very, very humble, but I mean, he hasn't got huge ego problems. I'm not madly keen on ego. I do find it gets in the way of good work, and it was lovely to be working with a whole bunch of people who don't have an ego. Jay Quantrell, who's the producer of the play, and all the actors, Hans Tester, Jan Kobler, Lynn Ann Leveridge, and indeed Ted, worked together toward an end, and I have to doff my cap to them because I think it was a hard journey for them to take, because it takes a huge, huge amount of soul-level acting to reach the goal at the end of the play, and they all did it with Ted's help magnificently.
They call this cast, I guess, like the founding cast, or how do they talk about it? Something like that. So that if it goes to other venues, do they go with it, or have they originated the role and that's it?
I don't know how that works, actually. Because of my dyslexia, I don't read contracts. I just have to trust people. So you're asking the wrong person that question. I don't know. After
Charlemagne was written, you wrote your autobiography. But this autobiography comes in 3 separate books.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't look like you've had that long a life to put together 3 separate books.
Well, I suggest you read them and then see me again.
Tell me a little bit about it. The first one is out already?
The first one's out already. It's in the top 10 in England now. It climbed up through word of mouth, rather like what's happening to the play, which is wonderful. I think hype is going to be dead soon. It's going to be back to the organic word of mouth that really is a steady foundation for good work.
And I think that's good, don't you?
Oh, it's the only way. For me personally, I think word of mouth is the layer upon layer of eternity that one wants to work for. Yes, and it's called The Right Royal Bastard.
The first one?
The first one, because I'm related to the Queen, and I'm born illegitimate, and I'm a pain in the ass. So.
Is that right? So that's how you named it?
So it's got on 3 levels, The Right Royal Bastard works. The next one's called Serves Me Right, and that comes out in September, and it's Macmillan's biggest title of the year. They're very excited about it, and I think they're both coming here, I think, in Christmas.
Will you do book tours?
I'll be doing book tours, yes.
You like to do that?
Well, I'm very proud of my work, actually. I'm much more proud. I never used to do tours as an actress, because I was never very proud of my work, but I'm proud of my work as a writer.
That's interesting, as a writer. Does Charlemagne have any future for the film? for a film
yes.
version?
That's why I'm staying here a little bit longer, because there's all kinds of peckings going on. It's a very exciting time for me, because I think that it'll make a beautiful film, and people are coming
I
to
do
see it,
too.
and I think that it'll move people's hearts. Yeah.
I think it was Broadway bound myself.
Well, today we had an offer, so it's really exciting. Yeah.
The other thing, what about your autobiography? Do you think that could go to film?
I think that's very difficult, because it's dealing with people who are so extraordinary, like, you know, my husband Robert Bolt and Laurence Olivier and Robert Mitchum and Bertrand Russell, and you can't really bring these people back. And I don't think anybody can really play these types of people anymore, because we're shrinking a bit in our personalities, and these were such huge, monumental giants of people that I can't imagine anybody ever playing them without belittling them.
You talked about these great people. You were nominated and for an Academy Award in Six-Sided Triangle, and your husband Robert Bolt won an Oscar for A Man of All Seasons.
And Lawrence of Arabia,
And Lawrence of
Dr.
Arabia
Zhivago.
as well.
Yeah.
So you've been very involved with American movies and that
Right.
situation. Your role in The Man Who Fell,
From Grace for the Sea?
thank you, yes, was very controversial.
Yes.
And some people have told me that they thought it was the sexiest and most sensuous scene they've ever seen. What were the repercussions in your career from that?
I don't think I worked for about 20 years.
Is that right?
I think I deeply shocked people. I don't think people think that they masturbate, you know. I think they've got a big problem. They're in denial.
And for 20 years now it's taken?
Well, suddenly, you know, I become fashionable, because now people admit the fact that they masturbate.
And the stormy marriages that you had?
I've only had one marriage. I've had two marriages, but the same man, and that's all.
Was it stormy?
Well, it wasn't stormy. The media turned it into something which crucified us, but we would have got through without the media, I think, very nicely.
Where do you live now, Sarah?
I live deep in the English countryside with my husband, who is still alive and kicking, even though he's had a severe stroke, and I'm a carer. I care for him because I love him, and I think that, again, is a story about love, unconditional love.
That's a really wonderful point to make, because you've been married over 20 years and to the same man twice.
27 years.
27 years.
The
There was
same man
something that
twice.
I read in your biography that gave me the idea that something supernatural had come into your life.
Something supernatural came into my life very heavily and put me into catharsis for 3 years, and I just dealt with it through silence. And through that time, because of these supernatural experiences, I was able to access the dormant writing capacity and singing and dancing, and I've written a whole lot of music, so I'm about to go out and do all that now.
Is that right?
Yes.
Oh, well, that's a new thing for us to know about.
The only reason I'm doing it is to let people know that God is there, of course, and that if you listen to Him, He will tell you everything that you need to know if you sit in silence long enough.
That's a wonderful about face, from hearing that you were atheistic on one side of that situation and now looking to your inner self for
Absolutely, yes.
bringing things out.
I was a very happy atheist, you know. I thought death was the end and that was that, and I was living my life according to those rules, which is greed, ambition, lust, all those silly peripheral emotions that are nothing to do with the enduringness of continuing on when you die.
So we've seen the ups and downs in Sarah Miles' career. I think, as you say, well, you didn't say it, I'm saying it, I think you're right up on top now, and I think right, R-I-G-H-T, opposed to W-R-I-T-E, and we're going to be watching for your autobiography, watching your play go on and on, Charlemagne, and looking for you in the future.
Oh, bless you, Joan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Sarah Miles. And don't go away. We'll be right back with artist Charles Garabedian. Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and we're back with artist Charles Garabedian, who was born in Detroit, served as a staff sergeant in the Air Force from 1942 to 1945, and then in 1961 got a master's from UCLA. We can easily say he started his art career late in life. What were you doing after the service, Charles?
I was see, I went to college. I went to USC and got a bachelor's degree in history.
Oh, you did?
In about 1951 I was. And then I just went to working here, working there, kind of dumb jobs. I worked for Chrysler for a while in their plant in Maywood and the railroad and things like that. Just, you know, nothing that had to do with my education at all.
Were you painting at the same time?
No, I wasn't.
So painting didn't even start until when?
1957 or 58, I think.
And how did it really actually happen if you were working in these kind of odd jobs?
Well, I think, you know, I met Ed Moses, who was trying to get back into UCLA, into the master's program, and they told him he had to spruce up his drawing.
Yes.
So he started studying privately with Howard Warshaw, who was kind of a drawer painter.
Yeah.
And one evening he was at our apartment, and I asked him, "Where are you going, Ed?" And he said, "I'm going to take my drawing lesson. You want to come along?" And I said, "Sure." And I went along, and Howard Warshaw pointed me to a cow skull and handed me a pen, and he said, "Start making lines." He says, "I don't care what they are, just start making lines in reference to this cow's head." And so I started doing it, and I loved it. And he said, "Looks fine, you're doing great. Keep up the good work." And then when he moved, he suggested that I enroll at UCLA in the graduate program.
So Howard Warshaw then moved back to San Francisco.
Santa
Is that
Barbara.
right? Oh, Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
Because he was very well known in the
Yes.
60s as maybe even an artist. Now I can understand why people had this respect for him.
Mm-hmm. He was a tough guy.
Was he?
Oh,
So then
yeah.
you went to UCLA after that?
Yeah. And they made me take all the undergraduate courses, and that was it.
Did you, once you started painting, I mean, we talk about your career starting late in life. I guess you were, what, 32 or
Yes,
33?
about 32 or 33.
Nowadays, that really isn't late. I mean,
No.
we credit you with starting a career very late, and yet now artists are just
That's right.
finding themselves at 30, 32.
Mm-hmm. A lot of them, you know, they come out of things like chemistry and physics and engineering, especially engineering. I think they hate it.
Well, whatever you were doing in college, did that actually apply to your work?
I don't think so. No, because I don't know. I didn't get much out of college. I got a BA in history, but that's all I got. I didn't get any knowledge of history. I just got the BA in history.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty amazing.
Just putting your time in.
Yeah, I think the background I came from sort of indicated that there's no future, that you just go through life.
Well, I was going to ask you, did you come from a strong Armenian background?
I was in an Armenian neighborhood, but not a strong Armenian background, because I was brought up in an orphanage.
Ah.
My two sisters and myself were brought up in an orphanage.
Oh, so you didn't have the that kind of Armenian family where
No.
they say an artist isn't a proper job,
Right.
that type of
No,
thing.
No, I didn't have that.
Oh, I see. So did you learn how to speak the language at all?
No, I didn't. None of us, none of the three of us. I think my two sisters, who are both older than myself, they probably learned it and forgot it.
Mm-hmm.
But the family came back together again after 9 years
Oh.
with my father, who didn't speak any English. So we had like 4 strangers suddenly living together.
But at that point, was he kind of molding your life in any way? I mean, how did you get that idea of being able to go to college? Because of the Air Force?
Well, I got out of the Army, and they had what is known as the GI Bill, and my feeling was it beat going to work, and so I went to college.
Most of your work takes on a very figurative bent.
Mm.
Do you think that was the influence of Warshaw, or did you have other artists who were influencing you?
I don't think it had. You know, I've thought about this a lot, and I don't think there was any influence that made me do it. If anything, it was just some sort of narrative. I don't know. Actually, I don't have the answer. I don't know what made me, why it's primarily figured. I can understand what kind of figurative it is. After all these years, I sort of been able to pigeonhole myself in relationship to the figure, but I can't think of any reason why other than it's just sort of been inside and that's the way it is.
This piece, which is CG 1964, was one of the first paintings, I guess, that you did.
It was right after I was shortly after I was out of school, yes.
And tell us a little bit about it.
It's a study for, it's a detail of, a study for a part of a larger painting, which is a family portrait in which I never realized it at the time, but people say, "Oh, you did a painting of the Holy Family."
But it's a painting of you, right?
Yes.
And here I have the large piece. Tell us who's in this piece.
Well, then my wife Gwen is acting that part, and then my daughter Claire is the child, and I think that's a Charles Eames chair she's sitting on.
Did you, when they talked about it being a Madonna and Child Holy Family, did it kind of change your ideas about looking at those things?
I guess I think it always crops up, because I deal with figures, and not so much in that one, but I think I deal with figures that are primarily mythical and symbolic, and so you can attach responsibilities to them very easily.
I see. And I think maybe a good thing would be this.
Well, that one becomes pretty obvious, actually. But I think whenever I deal with male and female figures together, I always just, after they're finished, I say, Adam and Eve, Adam and Eve.
But they come to you in a different way first,
Yes.
then you put them on the canvas or the wood or whatever, and then
they become Adam and Eve somehow. and the female is always the same and the male is always the same. I think you can see it in, let's look at this piece right here, which is Adam and Eve.
Oh, okay. And it kind of follows suit.
The Eve is always kind of bumptious and aggressive, and the male is always kind of a clod. And this, time and time again, it happens that way. Whenever I paint a male and a female figure together, it happens that the male is always the one that's alive and in control of the situation.
So, but you don't paint from real life then? You don't have models there?
No. It's,
One
because I
thing-
don't think, go ahead.
No.
Well, I don't think, I couldn't get the notion, I think, of, well, that mythological quality can't be had that readily when you're painting from a model, because you get caught in terms of details of the knee and just how they look. And you do get caught up in that because it is so beautiful to look at. And as an artist, you're constantly probing. And so if you're looking at something, you really go after it, and that removes it from that kind of archetypal.
Well, you're not worried about the skeletal being of your paintings then, obviously.
Not really. They have to somehow be convincing, because the limbs and the arms and the faces that are constantly manipulated in terms of structure. But I do kind of insist on them somehow being able physically to get around or to be convincing in some way. I think one of the things, the problems, say, with working with photographs, if you look at photographs of a figure and try to paint them, you find out that it's very awkward that legs occupy the same space or something like that, and you don't want that, so you have to separate the legs and show what the arms are doing, because you can't deal with the muscles so well that you have to sort of gesture these things.
I see. Well, I think that probably your insight into this led you right away out of school. You've had major shows immediately. You were lucky to get a gallery right away. You've had shows in major museums and galleries all over the world. You had an NEA and a Guggenheim Fellowship in '77 and 1980. Did these fellowships move your career ahead, do you think?
I don't know if the fellowships did. The main thing for moving my career ahead was a series of lucky breaks, you might say, incidents. That
And how
I
did
happened to
those-
be in the right place at the right time. Marcia Tucker
Right,
was probably the single most significant kind of
she was at the New
person.
School, wasn't she? At the gallery
Yes.
at the New School.
And but when she was working at the Whitney, that's when she found my work. She was out here looking for some people for the biennial or the biennale, the biennial, and my work just happened to be up in. Remember that funny place that Robert Smith used to have over in Century City?
Oh yeah. It was on Robertson Boulevard. It was a museum type of Kunsthal type of situation.
Right. My work happened to be up there, and she saw it, and then she looked me up, and it was, we went on from there. She came by the studio and spent a day once looking over basically this stuff here, and put it in the biennial. And a couple months later, she asked me if I was interested in having a show at the Whitney. And so the wood and paper pieces were a show at the Whitney in the small downstairs gallery.
Well, then that's the way I think it really happens with artists. You're in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
And I think you were in the right place at the right time today. We were happy you were with us today.
Oh, well, gee, thank you.
We really appreciate your coming out. And as we say goodbye, I'm going to hold up some of these paper pieces that you have. And I'm going to thank all of you for watching today. We thank Charles Garabedian, and keep writing to us at 520 South Grand, 8th floor. And we'll see you next time on the Joan Quinn Profiles. Let's